Look around you. What do you see? Maybe a computer, chairs, a table, books? Well, all of these objects are made up of atoms and molecules. These atoms and molecules are all different elements combined in different ways. Even the air is made up of nitrogen and oxygen, two of the most common elements in the universe. How was the first element discovered? How many are there? Is there a place that we can look that has all of these elements listed? That's an easy question, and the answer is the periodic table. But how did this table come to be? Who made it? Who organized it? Today, we will find the answers to all of these questions. Before I start giving some of these answers, I should explain a little bit about what some of the terms I've mentioned above are. Everything you see is made up of tiny particles called atoms. These atoms are the building blocks of the universe. Everything you see, another name for these atoms is elements. We give names to these elements like chlorine, oxygen, calcium, iron, and many more. All of these elements have been arranged into a periodic table, which I will talk more about later. Another thing to remember is that each of these atoms has particles. The proton, which has a positive charge, electrons, which have a negative charge, and neutrons, which are neutral. So now that we understand some basic terms, we can start answering some of those questions. The first question we are going to answer has to do with the elements. How was the first element discovered? According to the Western Oregon University's webpage on the history of the periodic table, we have known about some elements since antiquity. For example, gold, silver, tin, copper, and mercury. But the first scientific discovery of an element wasn't until 1649 by Hennig Brand while working with urine. He heated the liquid until all of the water was evaporated off. Then he studied the soft, white, waxy substance. When it burned, it gave off a greenish glow. Because of this, he named the substance phosphorus, which is the Greek words for I bear light. How many elements are there? According to my chemistry textbook, published in 2006, there are 115 elements. Some of these are naturally occurring and are commonly found around us. Others are very rare, yet others are man-made and only found in laboratories around the world. Each element has its own characteristic properties. Though elements may share common properties, none are exactly the same. The second set of questions we are going to answer deal with the periodic table. How is the table organized? Why like that? What are the different parts of the table? When you first start learning about the different elements in science class, you learn about the metals and the non-metals. Within these two general classifications, you have the metalloids, which share common properties. When you are looking at the periodic table, you see there are many columns and rows, respectively called groups and periods. Each one of these groups is given a number, increasing from left to right and period from top to bottom. These numbers are called the atomic numbers. These atomic numbers are the count of an atom's protons, which is also the same as the electrons. This doesn't just group like properties together, but it also makes it easier to find an element on the periodic table, especially if you know how many protons or electrons that element has. Some groups have specific names to classify the elements it contains. Group 1 is called the alkali metals, for their tendency to form alkaline solutions with water. Group 2 contains the alkaline earth metals, which are slightly less reactive than the Group 1 elements. Group 17 is called the halogens. These nonmetals, when combined with other metals, form salts. Group 18 contains the noble gases. All of these elements are very unreactive and are usually not found in a compound. The middle part of the table, groups 3 through 12, are called the transition metals. These elements show a wide range of properties from extreme unreactivity to being malleable and ductile. There is also the lanthanide and the actinide series, which are placed below the table to make it narrower. These series are named for the first element in them. The third and final group of questions we are going to answer has to deal with the history of the periodic table. How was the table developed? How many times has it been changed? And the most important question, who do we credit with its inception? The first attempt at organizing the table was credited to A.E. Boyger Deschantes, according to the Western Oregon University's webpage. a brief history in the development of the periodic table. In 1862, he constructed a cylinder on which he transcribed a list of elements in terms of increasing atomic weight. Unfortunately, his chart was not just elements, there were also ions and compounds. And that was the cylinder. While studying the same webpage, we find that later, in 1869, Dmitry Mendeleev, a Russian chemist, created a table similar to the one we now use. Though when he created the table, he organized it by relative properties and atomic mass. Because of this, he had to do some rearranging. For the elements to fit together right. Mendeleev is considered to be the father of the periodic table because when he first organized his table, he left many gaps, places for elements to fit in once they were found. He was also able to predict the properties of many of these undiscovered elements, and later his predictions were found to be true, or at least very close. It wasn't until 1913 when Henry Moseley realized that it wasn't the atomic weight that played a part in the table, but it was the atomic number. He then reordered the table and found that all the troubles Mendeleev had while ordering the table were dissolved. We have answered a lot of questions today about elements and the history of the periodic table. We have found out that though some elements have been around forever, the first one discovered by science was in 1649. The periodic table has a definite order to it, following the increasing atomic numbers. The first shot at developing the periodic table was in 1862, organized by relative properties and atomic mass. The table we see now was formed in 1913 and is ordered by the elements' atomic numbers. These are just some of the elements that make up the complex study of chemistry. As Robert Curl once said, chemistry is all about getting lucky.